The movie starts with a shot of an egg yolk where an injection is inserted into it. Then, we move out from that egg yolk and see another one. And this is how the story begins. But how does it all connect? Let's find out. Our main character is Elisabeth Sparkle, who was once a super popular and in-demand Hollywood sexy dancer. She was so famous that they even named a street after her. But as time passes, things change, and people's attitudes do too. What used to be a famous spot, that street named after her, is now broken down and forgotten. And that's what's happening with Elisabeth too. She was once the top movie star everyone wanted. But now things are different. Today is her 50th birthday, and her age is starting to show. This worries her a bit, but what really hurts is when she tries to use the ladies' restroom, and it's out of order. So, she has to go to the men's restroom. There, she overhears Harvey, the producer of her long-running show. He doesn't notice her and tells his partner that Elisabeth is old now, she's not beautiful anymore, and there's no point in keeping her on the show. He says they should replace her with a younger, more attractive girl who would be perfect for the show. Elisabeth hears all of this, and it breaks her heart. But that wasn't the worst part. On her way home, she sees her billboard being taken down. It hits her that she's no longer seen as valuable, even for ads. This distracts her, and she gets into a car accident. She starts to wonder where her life is headed now that her star life is slipping away. After the accident, a nurse checks her belongings and slips a pen drive into her coat. She looks at the pen drive when she's outside and then runs into an old friend. They chat for a bit, and after making plans to meet up later, she leaves with her friend's number. When she gets home, she plugs in the pen drive and checks what's on it. There's a video message explaining a substance called serum. The video says that when the serum is injected into an old body, new cells start forming, creating a younger, more beautiful version of that person, called the other self. The video also talks about how humans are like a matrix. Everything comes from within them, and it all makes sense in the end. It sounds like nonsense to her as she watches. Frustrated, she throws the pen drive in the garbage. That night, she goes to a bar by herself. No one recognizes her anymore. People have forgotten her stardom, which makes her feel even worse. She drinks a lot to drown her sadness. When she comes home, she's very upset. She looks at her awards and then notices a gift she received earlier. The gift has sparkles on it, reminding her of her past glory. But now, she feels like her spark is completely gone. In anger, she throws the gift at a large photo of herself hanging on the wall, shattering the picture. She takes the pen drive out of the garbage and calls the number listed on it. She orders the serum, and the person on the phone tells her to write down an address. After that, she goes to bed. The next morning, she wakes up, gets ready, and sits down for breakfast. While eating, she notices an ad in the newspaper about her show. The article mentions they are looking for a new host, someone who will be the new Elisabeth Sparkle. This makes her furious. She feels like everyone is trying to replace her. Later, she receives a letter with a card inside. The card has the number 503 written on it. She remembers the address she got the night before. She goes to the address, which looks like a rundown, shabby place from the outside. But once she enters, it's very high-tech. Inside, she finds a room filled with lockers. Both the main entrance and the lockers can only be opened with a number card, and her 503 card works perfectly. She sees two lockers, one with a different number and one with her number. She opens the one with her number and takes out the box inside. She takes the box home and opens it. Inside, she finds 3 different items. The first is an activator, which she has to take only once. The second is a stabilizer, which she must take daily. The third is called a switch, which controls when her other self appears. The instructions explain that for 7 days, her other self will be active. And for the next 7 days, the Matrix, her original self, will take over. There are also 2 types of food, one for the other self, and one for the Matrix. The reason for the food isn't clear at first, but it'll make sense later. The simple idea is that for 7 days, the new Elisabeth will be in charge. And for the other 7, the old Elisabeth will come back. Elisabeth decides she wants her stardom back, so she injects herself with the activator, even though it makes her feel nervous. Afterward, she looks in the mirror and sees a version of herself that looks 25 to 30 years old. Her body feels the same, but her skin and cells are new. It's like the old Elisabeth has fallen away, and the new one has come out. She's thrilled to be young and beautiful again. But suddenly, her nose starts bleeding. She remembers that she has to take the stabilizer for 7 days to keep this new self stable. She quickly stitches up the back of her old body, which is where the danger lies in this movie's plot. The special food is needed because both bodies, the new self and the Matrix, will be in use at different times, like swapping covers. Without the food, the bodies would die. So, she feeds the Matrix and then heads out into the world as the new Elisabeth. Feeling confident, she goes to the address where she needs to audition for the show that used to feature Elisabeth. She arrives wearing a new bikini, looking stunning, and with her natural talent, she easily gets selected. But this time, she doesn't use the name Elisabeth. She introduces herself as Sue. So from now on, we'll call her original self, Elisabeth, and her younger beautiful version, Sue. The main body is Elisabeth, and the other self, the younger version, is Sue. Harvey, the producer, meets with her and is very impressed. He's happy to have her on the show. Sue tells him that for 7 days, she'll be taking care of her sick mother at home, but she's only focused on getting what she wants for the show. Harvey agrees, and Sue is thrilled. The week goes by quickly, and Sue is busy. She does ads and everything that Elisabeth used to do when she was young. Things Elisabeth still wanted to do but couldn't with her aging body. Thanks to the serum, Sue is now living that life. However, 7 days pass, and the night of the switch comes when she has to return to being Elisabeth again. Now the switch happens. Sue lies there like an empty body, and for the next 7 days, Elisabeth will live her life. You can see the pattern. Elisabeth is active for 7 days while Sue lies there, being fed by Elisabeth. Then, for the next 7 days, Sue comes out, and Elisabeth lies there, with Sue feeding her. They both need food to survive while their bodies are inactive. In the next scene, Elisabeth goes to Harvey's office, where he officially removes her from the show. She endures the insult and leaves, heartbroken. Elisabeth lives through her difficult 7 days, waiting for her next turn to switch. During this time, she receives a letter saying her new kit has arrived in the delivery box. She collects it and prepares for the switch again. Finally, the time comes, and Sue returns. Sue starts living her exciting new life, but this time, she creates a hidden space behind a wall in the washroom where she will keep Elisabeth's body. In that secret space, feed Elisabeth during her inactive days and switch back when needed. Sue breaks down the wall and starts making the space herself. While she's working, her neighbor Oliver, who believes she is Elisabeth, notices and begins flirting with her. Sue had finished making the secret space for Elisabeth's body. She also took down the queen-size photo of Elisabeth and set it aside because now, Sue was the star. At this point, it's clear that Elisabeth's presence is fading, while Sue is getting stronger. Since Sue is finding success, it seems like there's no need for Elisabeth anymore. Sue's show is gaining popularity, and she's enjoying her new life. She's going out, having fun, drinking, and even hooking up. One night, she brings a guy home, and as they start getting intimate, Sue realizes it's time to switch back because her 7 days are up. Her nose starts bleeding, a sign that she needs to switch soon. But she wants a few more hours of fun. Desperate to delay the switch, she goes to Elisabeth's body and takes the stabilizer from it, injecting herself with it. As I mentioned earlier, Sue was getting stronger. Then we see them getting intimate again, but suddenly, Sue's body starts to burst. However, this turns out to be just a nightmare. After the switch, Elisabeth wakes up and sees that Sue has been partying and hooking up. She notices one of her fingers is broken. Elisabeth realizes what Sue has been doing and gets worried. She calls the company to explain that Sue's actions have caused some issues, and she wonders what Sue was thinking since she was drunk. The company responds by saying that Elisabeth and Sue are the same person. They explain that whatever changes Sue undergoes, Elisabeth must also face the consequences. If Sue becomes thinner or more beautiful, Elisabeth will also have to pay for those changes. Once these changes happen, they can't be reversed. Both selves must balance out, meaning they have to share the same experiences in time. Elisabeth starts to feel anxious because Sue's personality is overshadowing her. While watching Sue's hotness on TV, Elisabeth feels a mix of emotions, a new feeling inside her that she doesn't fully understand yet. At the same time, Oliver comes by to flirt with Sue and asks her out on a date, but Elisabeth doesn't open the door. A week has passed, and Elisabeth receives another delivery kit. This kit comes every week, but she feels worried and different this time. She goes to a cafe and meets an old man who comments that this period feels very long. She realizes, from the birthmark on his hand, that he is the same young nurse who told her about the serum. Now, in his old age, he represents his main body, or matrix. She asks him why he is following her. He explains that he struggles to remember if his original form is really worth existing or not. He then questions if she wants to exist as well. This makes her anxious. He asks her if her other self, Sue, has started to take over her life, meaning if Sue is swallowing her identity. Elisabeth remembers that Sue had taken the stabilizer from her body, which makes her worry even more. On her way home, she sees Sue's hookup partner, and she feels a twinge of jealousy because he's very attractive. When she gets home, she talks to her friend Fred. He gave her his number when she had the accident. They have a nice conversation, and Elisabeth starts to feel excited about him. They decide to meet in the evening, which makes her happy. That evening, Elisabeth starts comparing herself to Sue again. She thinks Sue is very beautiful while she feels less attractive. To boost her confidence, she does her makeup and puts on a hot dress, but her jealousy and feelings of inferiority keep bothering her. Feeling upset, she ends up sitting at home while Fred waits for her all night. The next day, Elisabeth switches back from Sue and has a nightmare. In her dream, a leg piece comes out from inside her, which shocks her awake. She wonders if it's a sign of something true. When she goes outside, she notices food everywhere. Elisabeth realizes that she has been doing nothing but lying at home and eating. Sue calls the company, frustrated that she can't enjoy her life. She complains that Elisabeth just wastes her time, and the balance between them isn't working well. The company tells her again that they are the same person and that she needs to make a decision. After hearing the same thing, Elisabeth heads straight to the shoot. Harvey tells her that the show has become a hit, and she's getting a promotion. However, he says she will need a little more time for this. Sue took a few extra hours at first, but soon she started taking extra days. She even removed the stabilizer from Elisabeth to extend her time. When Elisabeth finally switched back, she noticed that her body was severely damaged. One leg, one hand, half her face, and all her hair were in terrible condition. Parts of her body looked like they belonged to a 70 to 75-year-old woman, even though she was only 50. Elisabeth panicked and called the company, explaining that Sue was stealing extra time and, in effect, stealing her age. She remembered what the nurse had told her. Maybe Sue wasn't just taking time, but eating her in a way, just like the nurse's younger self had done. Sue was becoming more selfish, ignoring the consequences. The company told Elisabeth she could continue as things were, but she wouldn't get back what she had already lost. Elisabeth realized she had already lost too much, but despite everything, she couldn't let go of the new life Sue was living. Elisabeth decides she wants to continue the cycle. One evening, she's watching TV, and Sue's interview is on. Sue was about to star in a movie, and it was a big hit. This makes Elisabeth feel jealous. In the interview, Sue calls Elisabeth outdated and even criticizes her. People start comparing the two, and Elisabeth's jealousy and anger keep building up. Harvey sends her a gift, a recipe book. In frustration, Elisabeth angrily starts making something in the kitchen. She looks into the mirror and remembers Sue saying that her secret to beauty was being true to herself. But Elisabeth knows the truth. Sue was stealing beauty from her. Consumed by anger, Elisabeth starts to lose control. When Sue switches, she refuses to go back. She decides that she will be Sue from now on, no matter what. In her rage, Sue takes out more stabilizer fluid from Elisabeth's body, draining her completely. This goes on for 3 months, with Sue taking more and more time. Finally, it's the 30th of December, and the 31st is the big New Year's Eve show. Now Sue is resting at home with her boyfriend when her nose starts bleeding. This means she needs more stabilizer fluid, but it's all gone, and she hasn't fed Elisabeth either. Despite this, Sue tries to continue, but without any fluid left in Elisabeth's body, she's forced to switch. She calls the company, asking for help, and they tell her that switching is the only way to reset the fluid cycle. Although she doesn't want to, Sue switches. When Elisabeth wakes up, she's shocked to find herself as a very old bald woman. Sue's boyfriend hears her voice, panics, and runs away, showing he was only with her for Sue's looks. Heartbroken and furious, Elisabeth calls the company, saying she wants to stop everything. Though the company tries to explain, she refuses to listen, so they give her a termination option. However, when Elisabeth tries to switch again, it doesn't work. Desperate, she forces the switch, trying to wake Sue up. But now, Sue and Elisabeth have become separate beings. Sue is enraged when she sees that Elisabeth tried to end her. She attacks Elisabeth, throwing and kicking her in a violent rage. Elisabeth, trying to escape, runs to the washroom, but Sue breaks the lock and follows her inside. Sue slams Elisabeth's head against the mirror repeatedly, beating her mercilessly. Sue follows Elisabeth into the hall, and both of them feel a strange connection as they fight. Sue is extremely tense and stressed. She tries to attend the evening show, but her body is falling apart. Her teeth are falling out, her nails are coming loose, and blood is oozing out. She doesn't want to appear in front of the world like this, so she rushes back home in a panic. Feeling desperate, Sue injects herself with the activator, hoping to create a better version of herself. But instead, because her cells were already damaged, the reaction goes horribly wrong. Instead of improving, her body begins to break down further. The cells divide uncontrollably, resulting in a monstrous, terrifying form. Her body becomes deformed, with limbs and parts twisted and rearranged in a grotesque way. Elisabeth's face is stuck on her back, symbolizing the struggle between her old self and the new, monstrous self she has become. This transformation reflects the movie's deeper message about how people who have once experienced beauty and fame often struggle to accept aging. Elisabeth's soul, trapped inside Sue's new monstrous form, symbolizes how she couldn't let go of her former glory. The deformities on Sue's body mirror the internal turmoil and denial Elisabeth feels about growing older. In a desperate attempt to hide her disfigured face, Sue takes Elisabeth's queen-size photo and sticks the image of her younger self over her real face. When she steps out in front of people, everyone is horrified. Her body, continuously forming new deformed cells, shows that the attempt to cling to youth has only led to more chaos and destruction. Her cells keep multiplying, creating more twisted versions of her as she spirals further out of control. Sometimes parts of Sue's body would grotesquely shift. Something would push out from her stomach, or her breast would swell unnaturally. Her body was on the verge of exploding. Eventually, she falls to the ground and bursts apart, leaving only Elisabeth's face intact. This face represents the soul of Elisabeth, the part of her that still wanted to fight for life. She had chased after youth and beauty, trying to live a new life, but in doing so, she lost herself. Elisabeth was in her 50s and could have lived a fulfilling life if she had accepted her age. But she made the choice to do something no one could: stop time and keep her youth. If she had maintained a balance between her two selves, she might have survived. But Sue, the younger version, was ultimately a part of Elisabeth's own thoughts and desires. In trying to control Sue, she destroyed herself. In the end, Elisabeth's face, the last remnant of her, moves toward a nameplate where her name is engraved. She imagines the sparkles and excitement of life one last time before her face melts away and disappears. Everything ended where it all began. Elisabeth was gone, and only her name remained. The next day, the street is cleaned of the blood, and Elisabeth's existence is erased, leaving behind nothing but her name. This brings the story of the film to a close. The opening scene of the egg yolks, one emerging from another, symbolized the process of oneself trying to replace the other. But ultimately, both were part of the same being. The movie shows that while Elisabeth and Sue were technically the same person, their thoughts were different. Sue's thoughts were like a younger version of Elisabeth, so she tried to eliminate Elisabeth. Then, out of jealousy, Elisabeth tried to get rid of Sue. This constant conflict led to both of them meeting their end. Elisabeth could have lived her life peacefully in her 50s. She had money and had once been a star. It's a common thing that an actress's fame fades after her youth, usually around 30. It's rare for their popularity to last longer, and they have to start acting according to their age. Think about it. An actor who used to do romantic roles in their 20s can't realistically keep doing that at 60. If they try, it just doesn't fit anymore. Elisabeth should have accepted that reality. The serum she used represents her greed, showing how far someone can go to hold on to something they've lost. If Elisabeth had lived a balanced life, only using the serum once a week, she could have lived much longer. But her greed got the better of her, and the youth that came from within her started to steal her life force, or her age, bit by bit. This greed and desire to stay young led Elisabeth to ruin, when she could have lived a long, comfortable life by accepting who she was. But very slowly, over the next 10 or 15 years, both Elisabeth and Sue could have lived comfortably, earned a lot of money, and enjoyed life. Elisabeth failed to realize that what she was doing was ultimately affecting her own body. She should have been content knowing she was living through her younger self, Sue, and not some other woman. But Elisabeth wanted to experience it all firsthand, which caused her jealousy right from the start. As for the company providing this high-tech serum, we don't know their full intentions. Maybe they have some alien technology they're using to experiment on humans. Regarding the nurse, he seemed to be managing the situation well. He understood that the younger self was slowly consuming the main body. He even warned Elisabeth about it. Perhaps the nurse faced the same issue and stopped using the serum at some point, which is why he stayed in his older self. Maybe he gave the termination serum to his younger version to control how long he lived. Elisabeth could have had at least 20 more years of life, but because of her greed and jealousy, it ended quickly. In the end, the deformed version of Elisabeth symbolizes that her soul still wanted to survive. However, her jealousy and selfishness caused that physical and emotional deformation. In a way, it represents the inner sins of a human being. I hope this gives you a clear understanding of the movie. If you enjoyed this detailed explanation, please like the video. And if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe.